Imagine walking into a room full of people chasing success. Some work hard, play fair, and stay true to their values. Others lie, manipulate, and step over anyone in their way. But if you look closely, it's often the ruthless ones who rise the highest. Is the world truly rewarding the worst among us, or have we misunderstood the rules of the game? History is filled with figures who climbed to power despite, or because of, their lack of morality. Corrupt politicians, ruthless CEOs and dictators all seem to follow the same pattern. The fewer ethical concerns, the greater the influence. But why? If success was based solely on effort and integrity, the most honest and hard-working people would be at the top. Yet, that's not what we see. Those who hesitate, who constantly seek fairness, are often left behind. Meanwhile, those who act coldly and strategically keep moving forward. This raises an uncomfortable question. Is morality a weakness in the game of power? Have we been conditioned to believe in a justice that doesn't exist? But before we answer, we need to understand what power really is, not as we wish it to be, but as it has always functioned. Power has never been about fairness. It has always been about survival. And when we look at nature and our own evolution, this truth becomes impossible to ignore. Power is not a modern invention. Since the beginning of human civilization, it has determined who leads and who follows. In nature, there is no room for idealism. Only those who adapt survive. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution explains that survival favors not the strongest, but the most adaptable. And often, being adaptable means knowing when to manipulate, deceive, and dominate. Human psychology has not escaped this logic. Studies show that power changes the way we think and feel. Psychologist Dasha Keltner from UC Berkeley found that as people gain power, their empathy declines. In other words, the higher someone rises, the less they care about others. This might explain why so many successful individuals ignore moral concerns. It's not just a personal choice, it's a natural adaptation. Those who hesitate, who put others first too often, fall behind. Meanwhile, those who make cold, calculated decisions move ahead. Does this mean morality is doomed in the face of power? Or could ethics be a strength in ways we fail to see? To answer that, we must turn to one of the most controversial philosophers in history, Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche did not see morality as a universal truth, but as a product of power struggles. According to him, history has always been shaped by two opposing moral systems: master morality and slave morality. Master morality belongs to the strong, those who create their own rules and refuse to seek approval. For them, power is not something to be condemned but exercised. They define what is good based on strength, ambition, and the ability to shape the world around them. Slave morality, on the other hand, emerges among the weak, those who lack the ability to impose their will. Unable to win by force, they develop a moral code that glorifies humility, obedience, and self-sacrifice. Instead of striving for power, they convince themselves that suffering is noble and that dominance is evil. Nietzsche saw this as a reversal of natural values. At some point, the weak managed to convince society that power itself was immoral, while submission was virtuous. This shaped religions, legal systems, and even modern ideas of justice. But is this moral condemnation of power genuine? Or is it just a way to control those who could rise? And if power is not inherently evil, what type of person is best suited to claim it? The psychology behind success is anything but simple. Some of the most powerful figures in history share personality traits that might seem unsettling. In 2002, researchers Paulhus and Williams identified the dark triad, a set of 3 traits commonly found in high achievers: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. While these traits are seen as negative in most contexts, they can be powerful tools for those seeking dominance. A narcissist believes they are superior and destined for greatness. A Machiavellian is a master manipulator, using deception to maintain control. A psychopath is fearless, making ruthless decisions without guilt or hesitation. Studies by Babiak and Hare, 2006, found that between 4% and 12% of CEOs display psychopathic traits, compared to just 1% of the general population. These individuals thrive in competitive environments because they are unaffected by the emotions that hold others back. Lack of empathy, decisiveness, and a willingness to take risks give them an edge. While others hesitate, they act. While others question their own morality, they seize opportunities. But is this the only way to the top? Does success require a disregard for ethics, or is there a way to rise without losing one's humanity? Before we answer, we need to take a closer look at a fundamental belief we've been conditioned to accept: the idea that the world is fair. From childhood, we are taught that the world is fair. Stories, religions, and philosophies reinforce the idea that good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. But as we grow, reality proves otherwise. Psychologists call this the just world fallacy, Lerner, 1980, a cognitive bias that makes us believe people always get what they deserve. This belief is comforting because it gives us a sense of order, but it is also dangerous because it makes us passive. If we assume that justice is automatic, we stop fighting for it. Meanwhile, those who understand how power really works move forward. They don't wait for fairness. They create their own advantages. So does this mean we should abandon morality entirely? Not necessarily. But we must recognize that success is not about being good or bad. It's about who plays the game best. And while ruthless people may rise quickly, the real question is whether they can stay at the top. Many who build their power on deception and exploitation eventually collapse. Why? Because power without wisdom is a trap. Let's look at what happens to those who rule without ethics and why their downfall is often inevitable. Reaching the top is one thing, staying there is another. Many who rise to power through manipulation and deception eventually collapse under the weight of their own success. History is full of examples. Dictators, CEOs, and political leaders who seemed untouchable eventually fell. Napoleon, Hitler, and Elizabeth Holmes all rose through ambition and strategy, but were ultimately consumed by their own actions. Psychologist Robert Sapolsky has studied how absolute power affects the brain. His research suggests that unchecked dominance leads to paranoia and detachment from reality. The more control someone has, the more they fear losing it. This fear breeds instability. The irony of power is that those who gain it without ethics often become its victims. They trust no one, see threats everywhere, and isolate themselves. Their empires crumble not because of external enemies, but because of their own inability to maintain balance. Does this mean the ruthless always fail? No, some hold on to power for a long time, but at what cost? What's the point of winning if you are constantly looking over your shoulder? Is there a way to gain power without falling into this trap? Some believe there is a middle path, a way to be strong without becoming a tyrant. But how? If unchecked power leads to destruction, does that mean the only alternative is to be completely moral and self-sacrificing? Not necessarily. There is a third way, understanding power without being consumed by it. Philosophies like Stoicism teach that true power comes from self-control. Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's greatest emperors, ruled with discipline and wisdom, balancing authority with integrity. He knew that real strength wasn't about domination, but about mastery over oneself. Nietzsche also offered a solution. He introduced the idea of the Übermensch, Overman, a person who transcends traditional morality and creates their own values. The Übermensch does not blindly follow society's rules, nor does he destroy them recklessly. Instead, he reshapes the world on his own terms. In modern history, figures like Nelson Mandela prove that power and morality don't have to be opposites. He resisted oppression without becoming an oppressor himself. He negotiated without losing his core beliefs. The mistake is thinking of power as purely destructive or purely virtuous. It is neither. It is a tool, and its impact depends on who wields it. If you understand this, you can navigate the world's harsh realities without betraying yourself. But to do that, you must abandon the illusion that the world is fair and learn how to shape it instead. The world has never been fair, and it probably never will be. But that doesn't mean we are doomed to either ruthless ambition or powerless submission. The real mistake is not recognizing that power is a game. It's refusing to play it wisely. Those who wait for justice to set things right are often left behind. Meanwhile, those who understand the rules shape the world to their advantage. The key is not choosing between being completely ethical or completely ruthless. It's about balancing strategy and integrity, power and purpose. So, the real question isn't, why do the worst people always rise? The real question is, will you let them dominate the game, or will you find a way to win without losing yourself?